Good evening and welcome to Northwest Newsweek. It's the beginning of a new era for the residents of White Sand and Collins First Nations, as well as the community of Armstrong. A new wood processing facility and biomass generating station will end their dependence on diesel power, thanks to a multi-million-dollar investment by the federal and provincial governments. Adam Riley has more.
$3.76 million. That is the amount the federal and provincial governments have invested into the development of an industrial park on the White Sand First Nation. Part of that money will go towards the new wood processing facility and biomass generating station. Friday's announcement acts as a win-win, as the station will not only replace the diesel generators in the area, but Workforce Development Minister Patty Hajdu says it will provide options for economic development.
It's very hard in terms of economic development, in terms of actually moving forward out of poverty, stimulating the economy. So an investment like this, along with the great planning that the community has done, is in fact a game changer. It allows them to not only address the energy challenges that they face as a community on diesel. Also, it allows them to develop an economy in their own community.
According to Northern Development Minister Michael Gravel, a purchase agreement has been signed with Sagate Cogeneration LP that will provide revenue to the community. He says this project is just one of many recently that the province and federal government have collaborated together on.
It's been a nice habit recently to be able to work with Minister Hajdu and on federal provincial projects, and this is one that will have tremendous implications from the point of view of poverty reduction, carbon reduction, and the well-being of the community and many communities in the north of Ontario.
White Sand First Nation Chief Alan Gustafson says work on the industrial park will start on Monday, and both the generating station and the wood pellet plant will begin later on this year.
It's going to be about 64 full-time positions and about 60 seasonal. That's going to create a work for our community members, because we're short a lot of work up in our area, and it'll create the forestry and everything back for the people of Armstrong White Sand.
Gustafson says he expects those projects to be completed and online by 2020. Adam Riley, TBT News.
The inquest into the death of a Rocky Bay First Nation man at the Thunder Bay District Jail wrapped up on Friday. In August of 2011, 18-year-old Cody Thompson Hardy died at the regional hospital after being transferred from the jail. A coroner's jury ruled that the death was accidental and put forth recommendations to the province, the Ministry of Correctional Services, the jail, and the Office of the Chief Coroner. The 5-day inquest resulted in 27 recommendations, mainly focusing on drug treatment and special programming for Native inmates. Specifically, it called on the Corrections Ministry to recognize cultural and spiritual support as a fundamental right for all. It also recommended the province construct a new jail that separately houses inmates being prescribed methadone. The main recommendations to the Thunder Bay Jail were to create a Native inmate liaison officer and ensure separate and unique programming for young inmates. Emily Hill, co-counsel for the family, called Canada's correctional facilities the new residential schools, and say these recommendations need to be implemented.
Doing a good job. We need to start doing things differently, and part of doing things differently is making sure that we understand the unique circumstances of the inmates, and that includes the legacy of residential schools, colonialism, the 60 scoop, and that we're training correctional staff, nursing, healthcare managers, physicians, anyone who's going to be working directly with inmates in how to appropriately address those circumstances.
The 4 groups who received recommendations will have 1 year to review and respond to them. A 31-year-old truck driver from Brampton has been identified as the victim in a single vehicle fatality east of Terrace Bay. According to the OPP, the incident happened last Sunday night on Highway 17 when an eastbound tractor trailer left the roadway between Jackfish Hill and the Steel River Bridge and hit a rock cut. The investigation resulted in the closure of the highway for several hours. Meanwhile, motorists using Highway 17 in the White Lake Narrows area east of Marathon experienced some delays Thursday. They came as a tow company worked to get a tractor-trailer unit that ran into a rock cut back onto the highway. According to the OPP, the single vehicle mishap occurred Wednesday morning when the eastbound transport failed to negotiate a turn and left the roadway. The driver, a 43-year-old man from Kapuskasing, had to be extricated from the wreck by a crew from the White River Fire Department. He's now receiving treatment at the Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Center. The investigation continues. One of the key pieces of equipment used by firefighters is a ladder truck. The city of Kenora is looking to replace theirs, but they don't come cheap. Kenora's Aerial 1 ladder truck was purchased by the city in 2012. It came from Oakville, where it was used as a training vehicle. At 22 years old, the truck is starting to show its age, taking more and more time to repair as various parts wear out. Mayor Dave Canfield says given the age and time spent in the shop, the city needs to purchase a new reliable truck as soon as possible.
Some hydraulic issues, which I think are very fixable, but some electrical issues, which have proved to be some bigger problems, and sometimes electrical issues just point to disaster. And so the chief is looking to try and find a truck without spending $1 million.
Canfield adds the city's fire chief is speaking with manufacturers and dealers regarding a new or slightly used vehicle. The Grand Chief of the Anishinaabe Nation is calling on the province to redesign its new electoral map for Northern Ontario. Alvin Fiddler argues the new riding in the eastern portion of the far north doesn't appropriately represent First Nations people. Colton Prale explains.
An amendment to the Representation Act would see the number of ridings in the province jump from 107 to 124, including the creation of 2 new ridings in the far north of the province, previously covered by Kenora Rainy River and Timmins James Bay. The new ridings, Kiiwetinoong and Mishkegawuk, were designed to be mainly Indigenous, and while that is the case for one, Indigenous leaders aren't happy with the representation in the Mishkegawuk riding.
That's just it. I mean, we were led to believe that these 2 new ridings would be mainly Indigenous, which is, I think, the case for the Northwest riding, but for the Northeast, once you break down the numbers, it's only, I think, 28% of the First Nation population and 60% is Francophone, and that's not what we were led to believe when we began this work in May of last year, and that's one concern that we expressed to the committee last week.
The riding was created by the Far North Electoral Boundaries Commission. The commission, created in December of 2016, was made up largely of Indigenous members and was presided over by an Indigenous judge. They toured much of Northern Ontario as research for the new ridings, but in their final report said they wished they could have consulted with more of the area. It's a sentiment Fiddler echoes.
I don't blame the commission. You know, they were given a very tight timeline with very limited resources. They didn't have enough staff to be able to fully engage our communities or our leadership, and I think that showed in the final report.
The Northeastern riding has a population of roughly 30,000 people, just shy of a quarter of the provincial average. That's despite being one of the largest ridings geographically. Still, First Nations leaders are calling for a redrawing of the boundary lines, specifically bringing the southern border further north. That would shrink both the size and population of the riding and increase the number of Indigenous people represented. As it stands, the bill is currently before Queen's Park. It had its 3rd reading on October 17th. Colton Prale, TBT News.
Residents of North Caribou Lake First Nation finally have an all-season road to their community. The federal government has invested $5.1 million into a new bridge which links the municipality to a road to Pickle Lake. On Tuesday, Anishinaabe Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler joined members of the community to open the new bridge over the Narrows on Round Lake. It means the community will no longer be dependent on the winter road network. The opening of the bridge comes at a time when some winter roads are only open for about a month each winter, increasing the cost of supplies. Fiddler calls the bridge a positive step for the region.
Significant development for Weyagamau Lake, for them to be able to become a road access community. Hopefully that will alleviate some of the cost of living up there, the cost of goods, the cost of fuel, once they begin to utilize the all-season road. So it's obviously a huge step and a positive one for sure.
The federal NDP is demanding answers about the fraud case involving a Thunder Bay consulting company and its dealings with the Szechuan First Nation. Last year, the RCMP charged Joe Krupe with taking $1.2 million meant to feed 400 elementary school children in the impoverished community. Health Canada has now filed a lawsuit against Krupe and his brother Franco, involving a further $1.4 million that was also earmarked for Szechuan. None of the claims have been proven in court. The issue was raised earlier this week in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, the allegations of widespread fraud committed against the people of Szechuan raises serious questions about the operating culture in the Health Minister's office. Now, Joe Krupe is alleged, among other things, of having stolen $1 million from a breakfast program in a community so poor the kids don't have a school, and yet her officials protected his access despite the warning bells from the Attorney General and the RCMP. So yeah, now her lawyers are going after Krupe for the money, but that was money stolen from the mouths of children. What steps will she take to make it right for the children of Szechuan and right for the people of Canada?
Mr. Speaker, it's completely unacceptable when public funds intended for Indigenous peoples are misappropriated. The consulting group in question was involved in a third-party agreement with Health Canada and the Szechuan Health Services Board between 2010 and 2015. Once the department was made aware of an RCMP investigation into the consulting group, it conducted an audit of its agreements with the company. The department is now exploring its options to recover the funds that were found to be misappropriated. The department has taken corrective actions to ensure this does not happen again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Coming up after the break, we take you to the front lines of a military exercise here in the Northwest. Last weekend saw a massive buildup of military forces in the district. All 4 of the units that make up the O'Kelly Armories in Thunder Bay performed Exercise O'Kelly Defense on Highway 527. It was designed to test how well each unit can operate in conjunction with each other if they ever have to be deployed in a real-world crisis. Adam Riley reports.
A quiet autumn day is shattered by the sounds of a firefight. No, this isn't Eastern Europe, this is northwestern Ontario, and this was just one small segment of Exercise O'Kelly Defense, a defensive operation organized by the O'Kelly Armories in Thunder Bay. The exercise featured over 60 of its members from the 4 reserve units, according to Lake Superior Scottish Regiment Commanding Officer Lieutenant Colonel David Ratz.
They're practicing communications, they're practicing living in a field environment, they're practicing road movements with vehicles, they're practicing security and defense.
Making sure those soldiers have the right equipment and are able to communicate in the field falls under the purview of Captain Paul Secura of the 18 Service Company.
We're logistics, so anything from supply, transport, finance, things like that. That's what this unit would usually do.
On the front lines are the soldiers of the LSSR, an infantry unit tasked with defending the command post and utilizing a delay tactic. In this scenario, a group of enemy combatants made up of other members of the unit have been engaged by the LSSR and are being checked for intelligence and making sure that they are no longer a threat to the soldiers. After engaging the opposing force, these Canadian Armed Forces members are now moving to a new location to defend, to keep themselves readily trained for if they were to ever be deployed into the worldwide theater. These are the exact same situations they may face. But sometimes firefights end with casualties. Enter the 18 Field Ambulance. Unit Commander and freshly minted Lieutenant Colonel Dean Gresco says it's up to them to recover and keep the injured alive until they can be taken to a field hospital.
We inject a certain element of realism and maybe a little bit of situational awareness to what possibly could happen to any one of the soldiers when they're out on deployment. And so we had some casualty simulation done on these soldiers, and they were treated on site, and then we used our ambulance shuttle system to evacuate them back to our unit medical station.
Ending with dinner and a debrief of the events that unfolded over the weekend, these part-time soldiers now go back to their daily lives until the next time they are asked to answer the call of duty. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Part of the facade that makes up the downtown core of Nipigon has changed to address parking issues on city streets. Nipigon Mayor Richard Harvey notes the library was moved 10 years ago to its new location inside the municipal office, leaving an empty building occupying a sizable lot. Earlier this summer, that building was torn down to make way for a parking lot for the downtown area. Harvey believes it will have a major impact for residents and for those visiting the community during peak tourism periods. The industry began to take off after a downtown revitalization project in 2008.
Perfectly strategically placed. It's directly across the road from the Paddle to the Sea Park. It's right to just a few houses away from the Rotary Park. One of the issues we've had is that, well, years ago, 12 years ago, we had plenty of parking downtown. We've actually increased our parking about 25%, and yet today, one of the things we're hearing all the time is it's difficult, especially in the summer as tourists are coming into our town, it's difficult to find parking spaces.
Harvey adds the lot will also be developed in such a way so as to assist with stormwater management. Some of the more breathtaking tourist spots in northwestern Ontario are in the areas surrounding Lake Superior. That's the message Superior Country delivered at its annual general meeting in Thunder Bay on Thursday. And as Adam Riley reports, the organization believes there's more potential to unlock into next year and beyond.
From the trails and canyons of the Dorian area to the shores of Terrace Bay, there's a lot to see and do in and around Lake Superior. And those taking in the sights of those areas is growing beyond the borders of North America. That's according to Dan Bevilacqua, Executive Director for Superior Country, formerly known as the North of Superior Travel Association.
Overseas interest is growing. One of the largest campaigns that we did this year was reintroduce a stamp program with the Lake Superior Circle Tour, where individuals would collect stamps around the lake and receive a certificate in the mail for completing the Circle Tour. We've seen travelers as far as Australia, the UK, Germany, and many other European countries taking part, and Asian companies taking part.
One of the messages made during the annual general meeting Thursday was that the membership for Superior Country is growing and includes partnerships that expands across the boundaries of government and small business.
We want to stay exclusive. We want the municipalities to be involved. We want the lodge and outfitters and the business owners to be involved, the First Nations as well. We really try to encompass all the different types of stakeholders.
One of those communities is Terrace Bay, a municipality which has embraced the tourism industry and is in the midst of a major development project on its waterfront. Councillor Mike Moore says being able to take back the information learned during the AGM will help guide his community in that endeavor.
We have more in the planning process, and obviously marketing those activities and events is a big part of getting people to come and see what we have going on in Terrace Bay.
Terrace Bay is not the only community delving deep into the tourism sector. Nipigon has been working on promoting its waterfront as well as nearby Lake Helen First Nation, whose acquisition of the Chalet Lodge earlier this year will allow the community, which has been investing in businesses for several years, to expand its portfolio. Red Rock Indian Band Economic Development Officer Terry Wright says networking through Superior Country will be an asset.
Once we are up and running and developed, we will be utilizing them to help us market and promote the Chalet Lodge. And with the numbers that we're reaching right now, with 80,000 printed copies heading out, with us having an ad in there, will definitely promote us to not only the local area, but the United States and other corresponding countries.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
OPP in Sioux Lookout have charged a 36-year-old man with several firearms offenses. On October 12th, OPP received a report of a man carrying weapons on Highway 642. The man was taken into custody without incident and was charged with 1 count of careless use of a firearm, 1 count of possession of a prohibited or restricted weapon in an unauthorized place, and possession of a loaded, prohibited, or restricted firearm. He was remanded into custody on October 13th and attended bail court on Wednesday. A new airplane was welcomed into the Wasaya Airways fleet this week. The Dash 8 will join 3 similar Wasaya planes, bringing more air travel options to northern communities. The ceremony began with a blessing to usher in the new Dash 8-100. The aircraft was named after the late Harvey Kekagamic, a former Sandy Lake councillor and a longtime airline board member. Wasaya Chair Adam Fiddler says naming the Dash 8 after Kekagamic is a great tribute to a man who was integral in Sandy Lake joining Wasaya years ago.
It's only fitting that we recognize somebody with that vision. He was a visionary, he was a leader, somebody who wanted to see the success of First Nations, and it's only fitting that the new Dash 8 be named in his honor.
It's such a nice thing to remember him this way, and to have his name appear on one of these Dash 8s. And this is something that he always talked about. He always talked about getting a bigger planes and a nicer planes.
The Dash 8 can carry 37 passengers and large quantities of cargo. In addition, the plane boasts short takeoff and landing capabilities, making it ideal to service remote First Nations. Fiddler adds it'll greatly assist Sandy Lake residents traveling to Winnipeg. Well, coming up next, Marathon makes headway on a new supportive housing complex. Stay tuned. It's been nearly a decade since Marathon lost its seniors complex to a fire. However, a new facility that puts more emphasis on supportive housing is well on its way to becoming a reality. 5 months ago, ideas and concept drawings were all that Marathon residents could see. But after several public consultations and signed contracts, construction on the new $10 million 35-unit complex is well underway. Mayor Rick Dumas says the project is moving at a great pace, and he hopes continued good weather will allow the foundation to be complete before winter.
Well, as we heard from the contractor on site who has 100% control of the facility right now, that they want to have all the concrete work done before the end of October. So that fits well within our timelines. As we know, in Northern Ontario, we typically start getting cooler and more snow opportunities. The facility is going to offer a meal plan, a house cleaning plan, and support. Now, each individual will move into the facility based on their needs, but their needs will be addressed from the physicians that they're working with, and there will be criteria, obviously, to meet these facilities' needs. But at the same time, you will see the rate of your cost of staying at this facility fluctuate on the needs you're going to be requiring.
Dumas believes the project has the potential to impact how supportive housing is addressed throughout the region. He adds the municipality will take possession of the facility once it's complete next September. A traditional holiday spectacle will return to the region this year. CP Rail has released the schedule and lineup of performers for the CP Rail Holiday Train. And this year, the featured performer is Colin James. The Canadian rock legend has drawn huge crowds whenever he's headlined the Thunder Bay Blues Festival. He'll be joined on the train by Canadian pop singer and songwriter Emma Lee. The CP Holiday Train will arrive on the North Shore on Friday, December 1st to make several stops. It'll be in Marathon at around noon that day, followed by Scriber at 3 o'clock, Nipigon at 5:30, and Thunder Bay's CP station at 8:30, before heading west toward Ignace, Dryden, and Kenora. The show is free of charge, but attendees are encouraged to bring donations for local food banks. The holiday trains have been running across Canada and the U.S. since 1999 and have helped bring in 4 million pounds of food and $13 million for food banks along the route. Well, that'll do it for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thanks for watching. Be sure to tune in next time.